Welcome to Thought Garden on the Air, where we explore the stories, strategies, and skills that shape the most compelling personal brands and talented professionals today. I'm your host, Alexis Quintal, CEO and owner of Rosarium, a personal branding and public relations firm dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, business leaders, and influencers monetize and elevate their personal brands to achieve their goals. So this season, we're diving into the powerhouses behind brand amplification storytelling. Today's guest is the perfect example of a media mogul who's reshaped the local media landscape. So today we're joined by Bridgette Bello, CEO and publisher of Tampa Bay Business and Wealth magazine. With more than 30 years of experience in media and having served as the first women publisher of the Tampa Bay Business Journal, Bridgette brings unmatched insights into how media really works, what makes your story pitchable, and how can entrepreneurs harness editorial power to scale their brands. So welcome, Bridgette.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's start with your journey. How did you find your way into media, and how did you become one of the most influential voices in Tampa Bay's journalism?
Oh, gosh. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but thank you. That's very kind of you. It's actually kind of a boring story. I knew I wanted to be in media from a very young age. I wrote a commercial for one of my parents' clients when I was like 6 years old. He was a gutter company, and I wrote the commercial from the perspective of being a raindrop. And it actually made it on TV all the way back when I was in elementary school. My track was journalism school in college. I was college newspaper editor and worked at the college newspaper at the University of Florida. And so I kind of have always known I'm one of those people that actually went to school for what I wanted to do. Always been a truth seeker, always felt like that that's where my calling was. And so not super exciting story, but it's true.
No, it's helpful to hear that journey. And it's funny too, because whenever I talk to other media professionals, I have a similar path, right? Study journalism, editor of my school newspaper. You can still kind of find some of the articles I've written for my college newspaper. And so it's interesting to see where you end up, right? Like I'm kind of on the other side of media, but there's still a lot of overlap on what we do. So that's really interesting. So what are some challenges in shaping your voice? I mean, this is obviously a very male-dominated industry. I mean, maybe not as much as it used to be. So I can imagine that might have been a interesting journey. So what was that like for you?
My long experience in this industry since the early 90s. It's been a long time. Yeah. So it's not nearly as male dominated as it used to be. I mean, I always talk about, when given the opportunity to talk about mentors, that the large majority of my mentors actually were men. And I'm super grateful for that. Try to make sure that in my mentoring journey that I am a woman that's available to women to help them through that. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I like to tell a story about one of the car dealers that I called on in the early 90s, who I had been trying to get him to do business with me for quite some time. And I finally was so frustrated that I was like, what's it going to take? Like, what do I have to do to earn your business? And he actually said to me, wear shorter skirts and lower cut tops like the rest of the media girls do. And I promptly turned around and walked out of his office at that point.
Yeah.
That was early 80s, but, as late as late 2000s, I had somebody that I walked in a similar situation, was trying to earn their business. And he threw his legs up on the desk and crossed his arms across his chest. And he said, let me tell you how this is going to go, sweetheart, and that was late 2000s. So it's kind of amazing that, that it was still taking place then. It's a fun business. It's an interesting business. It looks sexy from the outside.
Yeah.
But it isn't always. And certainly having the men run the show presents its own challenges in some cases. But I think for the most part, I've certainly gotten past that. That doesn't happen to me anymore. And I don't really see that happening to younger women in the business anymore. So we've come a long way, as they say.
Yeah. Well, thank you for helping, right? Those of us and, that are coming through the industry and kind of setting that standard, and that's not okay. But you also mentioned you had some great male mentors. So is there one in particular that you can share about?
Yeah, there's actually two who really stand out in my history in the media business. The first one was the owner of the radio station that I worked at. That was my first broadcast journalism that was paid, and that I wasn't doing for free as editor of my college newspaper. Um, and I had to be on the air at 4:30 in the morning, and me, people listening might know me. I'm not a 4:30 in the morning kind of girl.
Yeah.
And so I was late a lot, and I was figuring out my way. I was in college, and he came in one day and he kind of took me by the arm and he said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you." And I was like, "Oh God, I'm getting fired. I'm sorry. I won't be late anymore. 4:30 is early." And he took me out to the parking lot and he pointed to two cars that were in the parking lot, and one of them was known to explode on impact. Actually, it was called a Pinto, and like if somebody hit you from behind in that car, they literally would blow up. And he pointed at that car and he said, "That's the car that my highest paid on-air personality drives." And then he pointed to a BMW on the other end of the parking lot and he said, "That's the car that my highest paid salesperson drives. What kind of car do you want to drive?" And he really changed the trajectory of my career with that question, because of course I picked the BMW. I mean, most of us would, right?
Yeah.
Having no idea what that meant, by the way, highest paid salesperson. I mean, how is that different from being on the air and being a journalist? But I wanted the BMW, so I said yes. And that took me up the track of the business side of things and really made it so that I was uniquely well-rounded. I had the journalism background, but also the understanding of kind of how media gets paid for or got paid for back in those days, and how I ended up progressing into being the president and publisher, CEO and publisher role, because I really do have a foothold in both aspects of what's really important in business. So that was a big one, teaching me that side of it.
That's great. Yeah. Well, and so, from knowing me for a little bit in Rosarium, we talk a lot about personal branding. So I'm curious too, through your journey and, how do you describe the evolution of your personal brand over the years, and how do you see it today?
Well, one of my favorite jokes is that I'm really glad there was no such thing as social media and cameras in everyone's hands when I was growing up, because I think that would have changed things for a lot of us, right? None of us are without mistakes along the way. I just was fortunate to grow up in a time where people weren't recording them, right? But I really believe in my core in, say what you mean and mean what you say. And if you tell somebody you're going to do something, do it. Do it with integrity, do it with heart. And so I, as a general rule, won't commit to something that I'm not going to do and that I'm not going to do as well as I am capable of doing. I do a lot to help others, to help nonprofit organizations, to help women in business, to help veterans. I'm super passionate about, what they give to us and how I can give back to them at the same time. I've had the opportunity to experience a lot of social issues, as some would refer to it. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I'm a domestic violence survivor. And so I do a lot to speak on, hey, that doesn't have to define you, and how you can help others with the things that happen to you. That happen potentially for a reason, right? So that you do something with them. So really my personal brand has always been around being authentic, being somebody that can be counted on. If I say you can count on me, like I said, saying what I mean, meaning what I say. And just hoping that I'm leaving this place a little bit better than I found it, and leaving a lunch with somebody better than I found them, and doing what I can to make a difference, as cheesy as that sounds.
Yeah.
So I think that your personal reputation and your relationships really the only currency that matters, and really the only thing that we leave this world with, right? Is how we made people feel and who we were as a person. And so I protect both of those things with veracity.
Right. Yeah. It makes me think of, you never really know what someone's going through or, has been through, even just some things you've shared. I didn't know about you. I've known you for a couple of years, and that's a big piece of your story. But like you said, it doesn't define you. And, it doesn't give you reason to just automatically assume or, be rude to someone because you're having a bad day, right? You never know what they're experiencing. It could be worse, or, it's not even really about comparison. It's just about just being a good human.
Being a good human. Yeah. I think if we all operated from the space of trying to be a good human, this would be a much better world.
Yeah. Yeah. But then I was laughing because you brought up lunch, and I had to think back to the last time we had lunch. But I can't say, I left better than I got there, but I don't think you did.
My steak didn't taste so good that day, and but I made you laugh, right? And we will never forget that lunch.
It's a memorable lunch.
For sure.
I love that. Well, so obviously, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs. They're looking to get into media's radar. So what do you think makes a brand or a founder like media worthy? Because a lot of them think they're not worthy when they really are. But what would, in your eyes, does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's different for every organization and every situation, right? For Tampa Bay Business and Wealth, we're looking for a particular position. We want them to be the president or the CEO of the company. We want the company to have a certain revenue threshold. We want them to be philanthropic and somebody who gives back to the community. And so, when people ask us, what does it take to get on the cover of your magazine? We literally have a list of like 17 things I think that we send to them and that they agree to. Oftentimes we find that the people that we want, it's not that they don't think they're worthy, it's that they don't want to be in the spotlight. And that's really a part of what we're looking for. Yeah, there's a lot of people who just, they don't want the media, they don't want the press. And typically those are some of the best stories and the most inspirational and the ones that can really help other people. I think the best way, and it's funny, I'm going to be on a panel in a couple of weeks talking about this. I think the thing that a lot of people miss out on is focusing on what's in it for the outlet, right? Like, how do you make your story make sense for a Tampa Bay Business and Wealth? Or how is that different from how you make it make sense for a St. Pete Rising or ABC Action News? Or, the number of times that I respond to a story pitch by saying that's just not a TVBW story. That's not who we are, right? We focus on economic development related stories. We want to talk about companies that are moving here and that are hiring a workforce. We don't want to talk about the companies that are leaving here or that are laying off most of their staff. That's not a TBBW story, right? And so I think the biggest thing that people miss out on when it comes to media is really understanding the outlet that they're pitching to or that they're hoping for coverage from, and tailoring that story to what they're looking for. And so I think that's a really simple tip to share with people, right? Think about the kind of stories that you're used to coming from that media outlet and find a way to make your story fit in what they're looking for.
Exactly, right. Don't just copy and paste in the same pitch.
Put it on the wire and then say, why did nobody pick this up? Well, because the way it was presented on the wire didn't make it compelling for anybody in the local media to pick it up, right? And so it's no different than anything else. A tremendous amount of it has to do with relationships, with understanding each other, with trusting each other, with knowing, hey, Alexis isn't going to turn me on to somebody for a cover story that she hasn't already vetted, or isn't going to pitch me a story that doesn't make sense for my audience. And Oftentimes that's not how people handle it. It's throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And
yeah,
it often doesn't stick, right?
right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Not for the same. You even mentioned a few other local outlets, like they all have very different viewers, different storylines they focus on. So you really need to tailor the approach for each of them, or maybe eliminate some, right? Your story isn't going to fit every single outlet.
Right. Absolutely.
So, and you said building relationships too. I mean, is there an opportunity for like business owners to build a relationship with the media? Do you think that's professional, unprofessional? How do you kind of view those types of relationships?
I do. So I'll use an old example, right? Just because it's something that really stuck with me. When I was with a previous publication, a big part of our coverage was commercial real estate. And a big part of my coverage now with TBBW is also a lot of commercial real estate. But there was one commercial real estate company, national company, who their local leader, anytime a new beat reporter would come in that was going to cover the commercial real estate beat, he would call this person, he would take them to lunch, he would say, what questions do you have? What can I answer? How can I help you understand the landscape? He would go through some of the terminology with them if they weren't familiar with what a REIT was or what BOMA is, or, all of these acronyms that have a tendency to pop up in different industries. And he would just be this resource for them. And that person was always their first phone call. If they needed a source, if they had a question, right? Because he made them feel safe, because he built a relationship with them, because they knew they could trust him, right? And so, yeah, I think there's absolutely a place for that. I can think of different organizations who, even though their story has really made sense for TBBW, we haven't been given the opportunity to break it. And so when they come back to me and they want me to break something, I'm going to be like, maybe our audience isn't what you're looking for, because last time it was perfect for us. We didn't get the chance to break it, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's no different than anything else. A relationship or lack thereof certainly have an impact on somebody going out of their way to make sure that, if the story makes sense, that it does get the coverage that you're hoping that it does, because you've been a resource, or you've been a source, or you've connected us somewhere elsewhere. You're first to pick up the phone. That's a big one, actually. Oftentimes when you hear could not be reached for comment, which is a bad look, it's because the person didn't bother to call back, right? But if I know I can call you, and if you can't answer, you're going to call me back as soon as you can, again, I'm going to go to you before I'm going to go to somebody who doesn't return my phone calls. So yeah, relationships play a very, very large part in it, in my experience.
And you have to give before you can receive, right? So it does also go back to that type of a relationship. It's not going to always be.
It's not I would say it's not a quid pro quo, right? Because theoretically, I wouldn't accept anything that I was given, quote unquote, for coverage. But back to that, are you a resource? Do you return my phone calls? Are your pitches on point? Do they make sense for my audience, right? All of those things really is where the sweet spot is from a coverage perspective.
Right. Okay. And even now in the digital age, which we've been in for a while now, but what do you think still makes local media so powerful, especially with, we don't all get newspapers on our door anymore and read about what's going on, but obviously the industry has shifted. So how do you see the local media still making an impact, and maybe even in the future?
Yeah, I think it actually, it definitely is cyclical, right? People turn away from or don't necessarily have the same level of importance, and then they come back to all they care about is local, right? And kind of everywhere in between. I think Tampa Bay, particularly where we live, which I know not everybody that hears this lives here, but this market is so different. Like what's going on in the rest of the country from an economic perspective isn't happening here, I've been here for 18 years, and I can tell you a number of times that the economy's been really, really bad in the rest of the country, and it hasn't been bad here, right? And so how much information would you miss out on if all you were listening to was what's going on nationally or globally, if you weren't paying attention to what's going on locally? It's also not, national figures who are impacting our local region. I mean, to a certain degree, I guess some of them do, but it's the people who live here. It's the people who run the companies here. It's the people who employ our workforce here. Those are the people who are having the impact on our local economy. And you're not going to meet them or read about them for the most part in a national media source regardless, right? And so I think local will always have a place.
Yeah.
You go back to the relationship conversation, which I find myself in the large majority of the time that I talk about these kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to have relationships with local people than it is to have them with national or global people, right? And so it really figures into almost every conversation or every topic that you could think of, that local market is going to always have a place and always be important.
Right. Exactly. Well, we're blessed to be part of Tampa.
I think agree. So. Bay here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what's next for Tampa Bay Business and Wealth? Anything new coming down the line? Any new platforms, formats, events?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is we're still figuring out exactly what those look like. Perfection isn't a thing, but we're working towards perfecting and growing here in Tampa Bay. And then potentially, where does that take us? Does that take us to another market? Does that take us statewide? Does that take us across the country? We don't know, but growing here and growing in a growing market, which like we've established is what we live in. We still have so much opportunity here and so many products that we talk about that we would like to be able to bring to market that, we have to hire additional staff, which means we have to have the revenue to support hiring those additional staff, which means we have to grow locally. So, there's never a shortage of ideas and certainly no fear of execution. It's just a matter of resources in a lot of cases and setting ourselves up to make sure that we have access to those resources based on the success that we experience to get us there.
Okay. Fair. So stay tuned then.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned for any exciting announcements.
10 podcast ideas that, at least one of them will come to fruition very soon. We actually built the space to be able to do it. So that's going to happen. We've had conversations with potential broadcast partners about doing some type of a TV show. So that could happen very soon. We're very intentional about the event opportunities that we bring to market because we feel like just trying to sell somebody another ticket to another event for another award that nobody really cares about is a big waste of everyone's time. But if there's an opportunity to bring an event that doesn't exist, that potentially recognizes individuals that don't get recognized or acts of service that don't get recognized, we have a couple of ideas around that we'd love to see come to fruition. So it's not that we're lacking in the creativity or the what's next space. It's just, again, being able to execute and have the staff and the resources available to be able to do that. And we're working on it.
Right. Okay. Hey, that's exciting. I love all of those opportunities. I can't wait to stay tuned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, stay tuned. We're certainly not going to stay stagnant. We don't know how to do that as a team. We're not interested in doing that as a team. So
right, and that's why you've grown and come such a long way. So I can only imagine that will continue.
That's the plan, right?
Yeah. So how can listeners follow along? Like, what's the best way to connect with you and TBBW?
Well, a big part of what we're focused on this year is kind of being where people need us to be, right? And so everyone's different. The number of people who still say to me that they love that they can hold the magazine every month and they can touch it and feel it and turn the pages and take it on the plane with them, or, whatever that is, whatever that looks like. Certainly the print publication has some unique content. We do, and this is a part of our strategy and always has been, we do not have paywalls. And so if we run a story, anyone can read it online. So digitally is definitely a place to stay connected with us. We are very active on social media, very proud of the organic growth that we've been able to have there. And so social media, print, digital, event, certainly. And stay tuned for whatever gets added to all of those things from a product perspective.
Okay. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. So with that, we conclude another episode of The Thought Garden. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, and social media, of course, for more inspiring stories and actionable insights. And if you have a story to share or know someone who does, you can reach out to us at rosarium.work or on our socials. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Thought Garden.